Welcome everyone back to the CEO Roundtable 2.0 version today. And thank you so much for joining us. We've got this great panel that decided to get together after such an amazing response we got from the advisor community last week. And I got to say that, with all the negativity and the tough things that we have to hear about on a daily basis in the news, what we're really hoping to do here today as a group is to provide some really great feedback for you as far as insights and positivity that that this group has really had over the years as far as remote working specifically. And so first, before we get started, I do want to say a special thank you to Craig Iskowitz from the Ezra Group for doing the live Twitter coverage for us. That's really great. Thanks for doing that, Craig. And I see some advisors from the Pivotal Financial Advisor Group in Cambridge have joined us, so welcome. So welcome everybody in the advisor community. Great to have you. I do want to start by introducing and reintroducing this amazing panel that we put together. So Lori Hardwick from Riskalyze is with us, along with Robert Sofia from Snappy Kraken. And we've got Eric Clarke from Orion, Brian McLaughlin from Redtail Technologies, and of course, my man Adam Holt from Asset Map. So it's going to be a little different structure today for this webinar. We're going to keep it pretty conversational, pretty informal, but we are going to try to stick to three main topics around remote working. And it's going to be team management, it's going to be technology and culture. And so everyone on this panel really has a lot of great ideas and insight that I think just getting together and sharing with the advisor community can really have some great impact for you. And so let's kick it off with the team management focus. And Robert, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, happy to do that. So hello, everybody. In the last roundtable that we had, I touched on the fact that when you move to having remote employees, you need to manage them differently. The fact that they're present is not enough because now they're not present. And that's how it is in a traditional office. They're there, you see them doing work. But now they're remote. So how do you make sure that they're productive and that things are getting done? And I shared that you have to manage to outcomes, but that was about all we had time for. So I wanted to just kick off with the concept of how you can actually manage to outcomes and what that really means. So there are two things that we've been doing to manage our team of about 38 people remotely for the last 4 years. And those outcomes are established. And what we do is we manage people to those specific things, not to the time they work or the way they work, but to the outcomes. And here are the two things we manage to. Number one is what's called an OKR. And you can do a little Googling, you can do a little research. An OKR is an objective that has a key result. An objective and a key result. So you might say, your objective is to do this, and the result from that objective is this. And you define those OKRs, and you put those in front of your people in writing. You can give them 3 OKRs for the month that they have to manage to. So doing a little research on how to prepare OKRs and giving those to your employees is key. The second thing is a KPI, and that's a key performance indicator. And that's something that's quantifiable, something like the number of phone calls, the number of emails, the number of people you serve, the number of trades you place, the number of the amount of paperwork you process. So you've got two things. You've got the outcomes with the key results attached to them, and you have the key performance indicators that you can measure. If you establish those for your employees, once they're in place, you can meet with them once a week, once a month, to see how they're tracking on their OKRs and KPIs. And that allows you not to worry so much about what they're doing in a given hour and more what they're doing on the broader scope to benefit your business.
Well, that's great, Robert. It's a great start here, and opens up some really interesting conversations that I'd like to take it from the technology perspective, which is in order for you to manage your teams really effectively, what type of technology are you putting in place for your teams to communicate? I will, say from experience with Mobile Assistant, one of the things we implemented a few years ago that made a huge impact for our team was implementing a solution that allowed everyone to collaborate with multiple touch points. And so we went with Microsoft 365. There's a lot of different options out there. Slack does a great job too. But 365 really allowed us as a company to have both instant messaging, video, file sharing with OneDrive, and channels for communication within the different groups and departments with our company. And so 365 really did make a big difference for us. We added Jive as a voice over IP solution to help make the transfer of calls really seamless within our organization as well. And so one thing I'll just from an advice standpoint for advisors out there is keep that in mind, that you really do need to invest in that type of an environment for your remote teams, because it'll make a huge impact on their efficiency, and it just allows everyone to have one specific type of technology that they can rely on to either have a video call or be able to collaborate with different files that they need to share within the group. And so that's just from a technology standpoint, some addition that I would add to that. So thanks, Robert.
Yeah, and I would also add that, it's a great point about what technology you're going to use, transfer information, transfer documents, transfer data. One of the things that I have seen emerge in a really interesting way is that some of the smaller kind of teams, let's say, when it's 7 or 8 people and it's engineering, for example, they are actually getting online literally all day long and doing Zoom. So they can just, they're just working, but then they're like, hey, do you know the answer to this? I'm working on this. And that way the team, like how they're set up in the office is like a normal pod, if you will, or small division within the office, can have those natural conversations like they did before. So I learned about that. Actually, my son, who works for Brinker Capital, was telling me that some of his divisions were doing that. And I found it fascinating. I think that it probably is working really similarly as it would if you're at your kind of an open office environment.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of things onto it. We use Slack at Redtail. Works great for us. Engineering is a whole different thing, right? The pairing of engineers and stuff like that, which we've had to get more creative with. A couple of things I'll throw out from the technology side that we are doing or trying. One is donut.com. So if you're a Slack user, Donut is allowing us to randomly bring pairs of people together that may not normally talk, to have almost like a social hour or social time. You can have it automatically schedule and shoot it out, and it invites maybe someone from my support team or someone with my accounts payable team together for 5 minutes for a coffee or something like that, so they can actually force interaction. It's one of the things we've heard a lot from the team side, even in my leadership council yesterday, was the lack of social interaction. And we kept throwing out there, hey, if you want to talk to somebody, we're all here to talk. But nobody's really going to just raise their hand and just proactively do that, I feel like. So we're looking at Donut as an option to bring that together. The other thing that we've used successfully for some time is another one called Know Your Team. It used to be knowyourcompany.com, but now it's Know Your Team. I think it's like $100 one time per employee, but you constantly then have social check-in questions, culture questions. You can customize the heck out of it. But we do that for especially onboarding new employees right now. Right. So I think I read that Eric, you onboarded like 20 people now or something. Right. Mm-hmm. And then we've done like 6, I think now. So getting them on board and having everybody connect with them, Know Your Team is great for that. And it's not a monthly reoccurring fee, but rather a one-time lifetime fee per employee. So 2 things to check out.
I think, Brian, you've touched on something that's really key, is that, we're physically separated, but we still have to stay socially connected with each other. We're doing daily huddles by team in the morning and in the afternoons. And that might sound like a lot, but we're really trying to make sure that our teams especially are continuing to stay socially connected while we're physically very separated from each other.
Yeah, I guess this is Adam. We're, I tend to think of this from a financial planner perspective for the last 22 years, and then also as a tech CEO, kind of trying this new life. One of the bigger challenges was our financial planning firm never would have considered having remote employees. In fact, we pretty much promoted that everybody would come into the office every day. In fact, if they weren't in, they weren't working. It was a very rare thing to let somebody work from home in our financial planning firm. In fact, the same thing was arguable for the customers, right? They were going to come into a place that had presence and was thought out and so forth. And I think we'll talk about that. But in the tech side, I think because we had several disasters, we had a couple floods in our last place, it forced us to go online. It required that we actually consider what happens when we have the next event. And for those of you that are thinking about, how do you actually implement this, right? The feedback we're getting from a lot of our customers in financial services delivery is that this is all very new. We would love to implement a team collaboration program. We don't even know how to get the files to my staff because we have to do wet signature still on something. And I think one of the things that it's indicating, I know for us, is we do require now that everybody use a consistent laptop. Like, think about how straightforward and simple that is, right? Everybody uses a laptop, so they are plug and play now wherever they are. They all have access to VPN. They all have no content that actually gets saved on their laptops because you know what's going to happen. They're going to lose the laptop, or the kid's going to open up some virus, and we have to think at this basic level. So some of the things to think about if this is really, really new for you and you're starting to go into this remote experiences, you need to think about policies and InfoSec policies. And gosh, if somebody phones in to the office, are we going to get those calls if they want to make trades? How are my team and staff going to get that? So I think at a very high level, because so many people are uncomfortable with this process or it's really brand new, I think you have to really think about all the things you're doing today and how do I migrate that to remote in the next month, right? You got to figure out a way to do this, because this is, in many ways, I think we'd all agree, the new normal, right? It's some portion of our year is going to be remote. And it's also for our lifestyle, right? Doesn't it serve our lifestyle to say we could go work in Florida, or we can go to hopefully Europe and whatever's left, with our kids and work there and be productive. So really important to think about.
I want to add to something Adam just said, because if it didn't get really emphasized, we missed something critical, because he talked about security. And in this industry, you know how important the data is. And when you're scrambling to suddenly go remote, and now everybody's using their home computers and their home laptops, the same ones their kids play games on, you really open yourselves up for a massive risk. So firewalls, antivirus programs, I mean, some of the things we're talking about are about efficiency and connection, and that's beautiful. But at a very foundational level, if you're not getting that support from your firm, ask for it. If you don't know what to do, reach out, because you absolutely have to stay secure, because cyber criminals are looking for this opportunity. They see this opportunity and they will be exploiting it. So for the sake of your clients and your practice, make sure that's a big focus of your attention.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a really big time for these nefarious characters to try and take advantage of the situation. And, I think it's a great time to remind all of our staffs to be extra vigilant with regard to phishing attacks and fraudulent wire requests, things that are being done, electronically. It's always good to have a second procedure to be backing those requests up with a phone conversation. And if that phone conversation doesn't happen, then the money should not move. And I think, right now is an especially important time, as Robert had mentioned, to re-educate our staffs on being extra vigilant with regard to any type of request, especially as it relates to money moves.
Yeah, the topic of security, at least for Mobile Assistant, has been top of mind for years, because we are structured as a company with remote transcriptionists that work for Mobile Assistant. And so what we did and have been doing over the years is put into place things like remote security awareness training. That's something I think that a lot of advisors need to think about. It's something it's pretty simple to put into place, and it really does get in front of these type of issues that are going to come up now that we're going to hear about a lot when it comes to phishing issues that you mentioned, Eric. Just having that kind of a revisit of what are really some best practices when it comes to when you're working at home, when you're working on a computer that might not be owned by the company. Those are definitely things that I would recommend definitely getting into place sooner rather than later, because I really do think that this remote working environment is really here to stay for an indefinite amount of time. So.
To the security stuff, I'll add one other tool that we use. Last time I said we did challenges around security awareness training. It's a company called Wizer, and it's Wizer, WIZER-training.com. And it's a great way to handle the phishing email tests and all that type of stuff in a fun way.
Yeah, and I'll second that, Brian. That's Wizer is the company we've been using and had real good success with it, and really easy
Nice.
interface, easy for the employees to get through, and doesn't take a ton of time either. So.
Yeah, and I would just add, to your point, not just about, and certainly to Eric's point about security and picking up the phone, I think that plays into how teams work better too. We all kind of get in our groove of looking at Slack or looking at email and trying to respond electronically. And, I just think that we need to kind of train ourselves to realize picking up the phone and having that collaborative conversation frequently is the easiest and quickest way to exchange that data and move on. But for some reason, we kind of get stuck in a rut sometimes with those electronic exchanges. And I would just encourage everyone to help their teams remember to pick up the phone.
Yeah, that's great, Lori. One of the things to keep in mind too is that everybody is having to think about the remote working environment now much differently, because now if you are going to have your team working on video calls, like what does that environment look like that they're working in, right? And is it secure? Do they have paperwork laying around? Things like that you never really had to think about before, which is becoming real now, because everyone is forced to be working in their home environment. Not everybody has the same setup that we do right now. Like Lori, you have a beautiful home office set up there. A lot of people might not have that type of environment. So that's the one thing I would say is just have that conversation with your team and making sure that they are vigilant about the security aspect of being able to see where you are and where your office is located is pretty important right now.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny if I can throw something in there. Corey, you mentioned something that's really been, since we've been having so many of these conversations, obviously with our communities and of course within our own teams and our writing content. For many years, we in our financial planning firm, we focused on the remote delivery of advice. That seems kind of apropos given what we do. But I think with one of the feedback points I'm getting from a lot of financial advisors or people in the wealth management space recently is this general reticence to adopt new technology around the remote. They think that the first thing is, I got to get Zoom meeting, or I got to get Join Me, I got to get something that's going to enable me to screen share. And that's like, okay, I solved that problem. And I got to call some people and I'm going to do the same thing I've always done. And one of the reasons why I say that's really important to address, and I'd love to hear your opinions, is because I know, I'll speak from personal experience, we spent a lot of time thinking about our customer journey, from how they were introduced to us, to our brand, our website, the marketing material they got, the coasters on the table were branded, the awards where we put them, the artwork, the tables. We spent tens of thousands of dollars to make this an intentional experience, because we knew that by managing the brand experience, it would lift our overall preeminence when it came time to asking for the business. And of course, people have certain expectations around financial advisors being in some kind of environment, right? Walk into the bank, it looks a certain way. All of a sudden, that entire investment just got deprecated, okay? Because nobody can use it, nobody can go into it, and all I've got is this little box here that's framing my head and the background behind it and my tech stack or my presentation layer. And I think it's really shocking a lot of people to recognize that they feel somewhat naked coming into an environment where they now have to reinvent that customer journey from gumption and from guts and relationship and experience. And the reason I bring it up is because I'm continuously surprised at how much time, money, and attention financial advisors will spend on making sure that the experience visually is great, but then balk when they have to spend a couple $100s on a technology that could impact them drastically. Mm-hmm. So the real kind of, I think some of the disconnect that I think we're being forced to address right now is that literally financial advisors are actually going to start competing with robo-advice, because we're competing in the same frame environment. And I'd be curious as to how each of you are helping advisors address being different and delivering on value proposition that they may not be aware of.
Well, I'll add, you know, Adam, with all due respect, I disagree with that. I think that robo-advice, at least in its most kind of foundational core, is more about interacting with a robot and getting asset allocations based on just a risk tolerance you throw out there, and, you know, risk tolerances that don't even really ask you anything about the emotional side. It's it's really bottled up in a vacuum, in my opinion, in those pure robo digital interactions. As we've seen, a lot of the those robo firms have now moved into an optionality for human advice. And so, you know, we've always held out in the investment industry, and I know you believe this too, is that human advice is very important. Now, making sure that we're delivering that advice, whether it's video or in some other way, I know that this will clearly create a whole lot more options for us, this situation that we're in. But as we continue to go down this path, I don't think it takes away from the importance of human advice, particularly when it comes to financial advisors interacting with their clients.
I agree with what you said, Lori. But I think at the beginning, there's something else that Adam said besides the robo-advice point that is extremely critical right now. And that's the experiential component of it. Because if you think about that entire experience that a prospect has, there's something about walking into a well-appointed, well-thought-out office with people dressed a certain way, behaving a certain way, that can instill confidence and accelerate the sales process. Mm-hmm. All of that makes a difference. Even the psychology of the shape of the table you sit at. I know some of you have studied this. Mm-hmm. So now you strip that away. This is a different challenge for advisors. So the mindfulness around still creating an experience, albeit a different experience, is critical. In fact, you might even have to come to terms with the realization that more of the success you were having closing business and building confidence in people was coming from external factors. And you might have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm going to do to really deliver value without all of that around me? And warming people up and building confidence, instilling confidence, demonstrating expertise, showing empathy, making connection. For example, the way you run a Zoom meeting. If you hop on a Zoom meeting with a prospect, it's going to be a very different way to introduce that meeting, to warm up that meeting, to ingratiate them to you. How are you going to turn that from a cold screen into a truly human interaction? And spending some time around that. What can I do to make this more personal? What can I do to make this more impactful? How do I want to have my team members prep for this meeting in a certain way, or prep the prospect in a certain way? Or, you know, what am I going to do for the client that's an act of kindness after this meeting that I didn't used to have to do, but I have to do now to make it better? These are very important things to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was a question that came in the Q&A. And by the way, for the audience here, please put in questions. Those are really important, and we can answer in real time if we can. If we can't, we'll even get back to you afterwards. But one of the things to tie in with what you talked about at the very beginning there was what this question was, which is how does everybody on this panel think that remote working is going to be played out in the long term? Because everybody knows how it's impacting their lives right now, and we all are living it, right? Nobody's getting haircuts, and we're having to deal with the technology aspect of all of a sudden we have a team that's remote, and how do we deal with that? But thinking about how the things that we put into place today that will actually be with us long term, because what we end up finding out is that it makes the customer experience and the client experience more really a lot richer because of the additional interaction we're having through video, through this type of technology, that all of a sudden, when things are back to more the new normal, whatever that is, and everybody can kind of come out of their homes and interact again, I think that it's going to be really important that there's a lot of pieces of this remote type of communication that are going to remain. And so I think the investment isn't just short term. I do think that looking at everything you're using, from whether or not you're using virtual tools like an asset map and a Riskalyze, or how your marketing is structured with, with Snappy Kraken, those are all things that the investment now is going to pay off, because it's going to stay put long term. It's going to benefit your customer relationships, I think, long term.
Yeah, I think that leads us into a little bit of the technology discussion as well that we plan to cover. I think that now is the time that that everyone is going to have an option to look at what works best for them as a firm. Does it allow them to work digitally more scalably? Is it, this kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, none of us would have predicted this. But as I look at, for me, it's very comfortable to work from home. I really prefer it. And I think back in college, I was not someone who went to the library to study. I always studied in my own room. As long as it was quiet, I was fine. And then there's the library goers who really wanted to have that distance between where they studied and where their home life was. And so I think that there's two kind of people out there, and it probably equates pretty similarly to those that would prefer to be in an office versus those who'd rather be at home and have that ability to kind of just work from home and also live at home and compartmentalize the time. So, as we think about technology, kind of pivoting back to that, I think there's going to be a lot of new opportunities for us to think about, and that we're already starting to use a whole lot more than we once did, as we've already talked about.
I think I've got a good question here for Eric. Eric, with Orion, you have offices all over the country, and a lot of people that are coming into these office spaces to work. Has this experience in this remote working environment we're in now, has it changed your thought on like a long-term solution? Or does it make sense to you that maybe 1 or 2 days a week your people might be working at home more? Has it changed at all your kind of viewpoint on the remote working environment?
The one thing that I think that we all know now is that we're, for the most part, I think 95+% of all of our staffs are working from home, if not 100%. And as this pandemic unwinds, I don't think any of us know exactly how we all come back to work and get back to normal. Is that when we finally get a vaccine? I think that would make us all comfortable to shake hands again. But between now and then, how this unwinds and how we get back to work is going to be a very individual decision. And that's something that certainly we're not going to be making as a company and forcing people to come back into the office if they're not comfortable doing so. So for us, this is very much a long-term reality of how we plan to operate and do business until people are really comfortable. We, first and foremost, we can't have our staff be worried or have a lot of anxiety that would prevent them from being effective and being efficient and being able to do their job to help serve our advisors. And we're going to have to really remain flexible, because since we haven't been through this before, I'm not sure how all of this gets back to pre-pandemic levels, to be honest with you.
How far out, Eric, are you guys planning right now for this to go for? Or, is it just indefinite for you right now?
Well, right now it's indefinite, and we're certainly providing a lot of tools and guidance to our team leaders and managers about how to communicate effectively, how to make sure that, that they're available for our advisors and for each other, making sure that, we're leveraging technology. We really don't have an end date to this. I don't know if anybody does. We certainly, are just simply planning on this for the foreseeable future until we get a vaccine and until.
Is there a point that we have to change our strategies to, 6 months? I mean, obviously none of us know.
Oh, I think
but like,
we're,
where's the trigger event for
I think
like,
we're-
okay, this is going to be really long?
Yeah, I think we're already at that 6-month mark. Certainly May 1st, I absolutely don't expect, nor do I want everybody back at the office. I don't think that makes sense.
Right.
One of the things we've discussed internally is when this all kind of passes a little bit more and people start getting more comfortable going outside and all that, is a voluntary work from home structure. So that, right now it's mandatory, right? Don't come in the office, that type of thing, unless you need to. So one of the things we've talked about internally is like, hey, let's just go voluntary for a period of time. And that might extend forever for all I know. I mean, as far as changes to how we do work from home models, to actually participate with everybody, and how do we get them comfortable, like you said? I mean, that's a great point. Some people are gonna be scared, and then on the flip side, I got some parents that are like dying to come in the office. they can't wait. So, and then do I social distance in my office? So, there's a new thing.
Sorry to interrupt you, Brian. So it's interesting for us because we just heard in Pennsylvania that the schools are indefinitely closed, right? So, we're talking at least 2 months of at least the parents having an exposure at home. They've got to stick at home because the daycares are closed, and that's gonna drive that. Plus, what do we do in the beginning of the summer? I think a lot of people will be really scared and put them in that emotional stress. Not the least of which FMLA or any types of other legislation that comes down that gives them protection is going to drive what we do. But I'm with Eric too. I think one of the bigger issues that I'm sure that our listener base is probably addressing is, what do I do with my commercial space? I mean, we think about many of us have taken on new long-term leases that can easily, handle twice as many people that we have. What's that going to mean for us? Should we give up options on expansion? Should we just really finally go to true virtual? I'd be curious what you guys are going to do. I know, Brian, you just invested in a whole bunch of awesome space there. I see it in the background.
This is going to stay because I own this, so I don't lease it. So it's not going anywhere. But I got 2 other locations that, we definitely talk about it. What are we going to do? And in Atlanta, I think we have 5 years left on the lease or 4 years left. Yeah. So, but there's it's a mixture. Some people do, like to Lori's point, some people love to work at home, like Lori. Some, like me, want to work in a social environment. So
I think it also, especially for firms like all of ours who have sold into broker-dealer enterprises and some of the larger wirehouses, as we all know, they need on-site visits. They want to see the people that are working there. They want to see the procedures. They want to see your office space. And it builds some familiarity with your company. It also breeds trust, I think, to some extent. We talked about that earlier, about how you conduct yourself and what type of people you have around you. So it would be interesting for the firms. I'm sure there will be a lot of firms who say, I can do without this additional cost in the real estate market. We've proven ourselves to be able to do virtual, 100%. What happens then? So that's the one part of it. I'm kind of like, wonder how that'll play out.
And Lori, what you just said applies to a lot of advisors too. And I think it's good to know what kind of advisor you are, because if you're a practitioner and you're the whole brand, you're the brand and you're the man or woman and that's it, then, well, maybe you don't need an office. But if you're serving larger households, if you have an organization of people that you expect your clients to rely on and you want them to trust, then you might still need a bricks and mortar for them to come through the office and see people and shake hands. And I don't think this is a good time to be hasty about making those kinds of decisions. This is a good time to focus on enhancing your technology stack, enhancing your procedures, enhancing the way you monitor and evaluate employee performance, enhancing the way that you market through other channels that aren't traditional. And all of that is a way to hedge your bets regardless of where this goes. But we should, at some point, I think, to be both shrewd and to continue to display confidence and support the economy, we should continue to plan for business as usual coming back.
And to kind of transition us into more of the technology conversation here, I know some things came up in last week's webinar that I thought were really great, that really brought to light the things that all of you and your individual companies are doing right now from a technology standpoint that are really meant to try to help the advisors and to help the situation that we all find ourselves in now. Would one of you like to talk a little bit about what your individual companies are doing right now?
I'm sure we'd all like to talk about it, but
Yeah, we can all answer that question.
I think what underlines that, Corey, is that we all have to, as leaders of our businesses and as our advisors are leading, working with our clients, that while a lot has changed in our world around us, certainly I think everyone has been disrupted with regard to what plans we had previous to the pandemic. The one thing that we can't let change in our businesses is that of a growth mindset. We have to be able to continue to figure out what can we do now, realizing the situation. We may have had plans to attend conferences. We may have had plans to host conferences. We may have had trips planned to visit different areas, or certainly our advisors had plans to connect with clients in person. Maybe they were having client events, seminars, those types of things. So now that all that has changed, we've got to ask ourselves, okay, well, what's the next right thing that I can do now to continue to grow our business? I think that firms that are willing to make investments today will come out of this pandemic really, really strong on the other side. Focusing on our core value propositions is really important. But again, above all else, figure out ways that you can leverage tech to continue that growth mindset to build our businesses forward. That's what our entire economy is counting on at this point, is that we can't give up. We've got to continue to drive home that growth mindset with our staff and certainly with our businesses.
Oh, that's great, Eric. I look at it that, businesses and technology companies like all of ours are really, it's an opportunity to really be innovative with different ways that we can all leverage the technology that we built and are continuously adapting to, so that it is something that in real time can be used in a way to help the advisors with whatever the situation is. So like right now is a good example. So we have, with Mobile Assistant, we have templates that are built into our app. Well, we have now the ability to push templates out to anyone that's using our service, so that there's templates now for a phone call, there's templates for an activity, templates for a client review, to try to just in real time be able to help with the technology that we're making available to the advisors that we think can have an impact for them because of the environment that they're in now, with more client meetings, with more phone calls that they're having. So that's the type of technology that I just love. I've seen it from everybody here over the years of just seeing a problem and trying to create a solution for it. I think it's going to be more and more important as we evolve through this pandemic, as far as what things on the technology side really can have an impact for the advisors, not just now, but to help them through the transition of eventually getting out of the remote environment, right? So that's all great stuff.
I would agree. I think that technology that allows advisors to be virtually, at least, in front of their clients, allowing them to see output that was specifically designed for them that can be shared. Certainly, Riskalyze has the automated check-ins, making sure that risk alignment is fully aligned with one's portfolio. And, that has been a feature we've had for a very long time, but of course now it's really important. So, as I look at those systems of engagement that allow advisors to be in front of their clients, including, like content management systems, something that really allows the client to feel like the advisor is doing something uniquely suited for them. And so that's where are tailored to them. So I look for, first, that's really important for advisors to be thinking about. And second, I think that we'll continue to see more creativity around that part of it. I do worry a bit about advisors being able to prospect in this stage of environment that we're at. You know, a lot of new clients come from being out and about and seeing someone and saying, I'm in financial services and they like you, and hey, I need a financial advisor. And so now it's a little more stunted, I would think. But you know, that's the one area on that prospecting. I wonder how that's going to play out.
Yeah, actually, I have some thoughts on that one too, especially given the kind of the touch we have for advisors. I think actually we're in a really interesting opportunity, and I'm not sure everybody sees it, because we're all sequestered, clients, prospects, all of us, right? I think it's a fantastic opportunity that advisors are talking to their existing clients. Maybe they're walking them off the bridge. Maybe they're just checking in, they're relating, they're looking for connection, and so they should be reaching out to their clients. Otherwise, other advisors will, by the way. But it's an actually excellent time to go back to the humanity and say, listen, we've been working together for a bunch of years. We've done certain things. Who else should I be talking to? And it's surprising to me how often, and this is a non-technology answer, advisors are not actually asking for referrals right now. They've built relationships. A lot of people are looking for connection. A lot of people need help. Advisors should be talking to their existing clients and saying, listen, who else needs my help? I'm willing to work with you virtually. I figured out a framework. I have my whole tech stack already figured out. I can, and I think a lot of people want to refer their family and get checked in right now. So I think it's a great opportunity. But the question is, who's going to actually step up and do that? And that's one of the big challenges. Hopefully the attendees ask themselves, are they asking for that connectivity? Because it's going to be the lifeblood for the next several months, clearly.
When you do it that way, when you offer your help, not asking for a favor, that's really the best way to go after referrals anyway. But this environment makes it especially effective, because if you finish a meeting with a client and you ask them, so now that we've done this work together, how are you feeling about the decisions we've made together? When they say, I feel good, thank you, that's the perfect time to say, you know what, I'm really glad. This is what I love doing, is helping people like this. And right now there's a lot of advisors out there that are not doing this for their clients. And I keep some spots open in my calendar to help the friends and family members of my closest clients. So I want you to know, if you know anybody who could use help like this, I will make time to help them. Even though I'm very busy right now, I will make time for them.
That's it.
And when you say that, what you just did is you asked for a referral in a way that is completely unselfish. In fact, you didn't even ask for it. You offered help. And that particular discussion is something that can replace the need for a traditional office, because the fine woods and leather couches and awards on your walls are nowhere near as powerful as the endorsement from a trusted friend. And then when you get on your Zoom meeting and you have that conversation, now you're doing it from a place of trust and confidence without anything else needed around you except for that endorsement. So this is absolutely the time to have that conversation with every client before you get off that Zoom chat.
Boy, Robert, that leads into really well, and you really kind of answered one of the questions in our Q&A. So there's some really great questions that I'd like to throw out there and get everyone's thoughts on. The comment from Mary here was just how financial advisors are going to differentiate themselves from the Robo-Advisor, like right now. How can they make their Zoom and go to meetings more personalized? I think you just hit on it really well, Robert, if anybody has any other thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been delivering so much financial advice over the years. And I noticed a couple of comments. I'm glad you brought it up, Corey. By the way, Robert, that was excellent. I'm glad that we're recording this, because I really think people need to hear that again. In fact, I'm going to go back and listen to it. Because it's true for all of us. We need to do this more. But the point is that there's a couple comments here about how do you create engagement in that environment when this is all starting to get a little commoditized, and how do we bring out what Lori talked about with that humanity, and how do we deliver that? Someone commented about why none of us have actually artificial backgrounds, right? We don't see palm trees all flying in the background. And our opinion of things like that is that it doesn't enable you to connect. It almost looks like you're hiding something. What are you hiding from me? It also is incredibly distracting, by the way. And so we tend to tell, and we actually did an edict given the security concerns that came around in media around Zoom recently, we set out a whole new protocol of how everybody has to have either a password or a knock feature to show the client that we're being thoughtful. Nobody's going to jump into the meeting like what Eric had talked about before. And then also, no more using backgrounds, okay? This is a time when we need to connect. Stop trying to make yourself artificially look like you've got the leather in the wood. You either do like Lori does or you don't. And this is the environment I'm in. I'm in my sweatshirt just like you. I'm a human. We're going to take care of this together. So I think that's kind of my comment on how to create engagement. Remember just to be human and don't overdo it, right? But the key of it for all of us, and I wanted to make this comment earlier, is that interestingly enough, how Corey put this crew of people together. I know for us at Asset Map, we're very concerned about what is that engagement experience like when an advisor is delivering their advice in real time on a screen sharing experience. And I think what's really critical about the technology investments, at least that we're making, it's how do I take that information that's really critical in Redtail and pre-populate my presentation layer so I don't have to spend a lot of time setting this up. How do I take the Riskalyze insights and communicate it where the client has their attention span? How do I take performance from Orion and communicate that, because we want to talk about that right now? And then how do I immortalize that with Mobile Assistant? And I think what you're going to see, at least from us, and I know a lot of us in partnership, is continued investments in making the financial advisor's life more effective so that they can communicate their true value proposition faster than ever. And I think that's really kind of the challenge for a lot of us to support our advisor community, is to make it easier for you to just do what you're awesome at, and that's apply your insight and empathy in real time.
You know, to Adam's point, I think it's important that advisors figure out how does that presentation work virtually instead of these in-person meetings. You know, advisors really have those down well, but then when you get on a Zoom meeting, how does sharing that information work? Certainly Zoom meetings can be great, but they can also be very distracting if you know, things don't go well. And I think that doing role plays across the teams and the members of the staff really help. So, you know, doing the role play of a client meeting helps to work through those kinks and realize, hey, this is how this information is coming across. This is what's resonating. This isn't, we're having problems with sharing this piece of technology, or, you know, the sound isn't quite right. You know, all of those things are important things to work out before you get into these digital settings so that the meeting is effective. And I think that's right in line with what Adam brought up earlier. All these investments that we've made into our physical office locations, now we've got to rethink that through this new paradigm and put the effort and the focus into these digital presentations.
Yeah. And during that role play, I think it's a great idea. And also to play it out where you see what someone's background is going to be like. I mean, you may have younger folks joining in, they just don't even think about what's in their background. And it could, you know, prevent, you know, like with Zoom, all of a sudden you just appear. And as we've talked before, it's, you know, everyone's appearance at your organization is underscoring your, you know, the perception that your client is going to have of you.
Yeah, and there's another question that came in that really is in line with this topic that I think is really interesting. And the question was, any tips from this group on how to overcome the struggle that new tech and software adoption has for the older generation of advisors and staff? And I'll just give a personal story, because this is something that I think relates really well to that question. And that is that I think you have to be willing to put yourself out there, embrace the technology, even though it's new to you, and be okay with it not being perfect. Zoom meetings don't go perfectly all the time. I just did a YouTube video that I forgot to cut out and edit 3 of the outtakes that I had in the video that I posted. Like, that's kind of stuff is just, it's going to happen. And as an advisor, whether you're older or younger, if you're just not really comfortable with the technology, whether that's using dictation after your client meetings, whether that's using your CRM and navigating through that system. If you're not comfortable with it, it's okay. But right now, it's so important to just be okay with it being a little uncomfortable, right? And so that would be my one piece of advice for the older generation and for the older generation of staff that are at home is it's okay if those meetings don't go perfectly, but try to use that technology because it long term, it's definitely going to have an impact and help you. So
And it gets easier the more you do it.
yeah.
And this is a training thing. I mean, if you're leading an organization and you mandate that your people start to use something, you also have a responsibility to help them or get them help. It doesn't have to be you personally, but somebody on your team can help. And this is a good opportunity for some team bonding. You got the young employee who never relates to the older employee, you know, let them help each other. Assign a little bit of that support and make sure that everybody is getting what they need because they've got enough stress and frustrations. Last thing you want to do is throw something on them and make their life harder. Give them the support they need so they can grow from it and then be proud of themselves.
Yeah, and dovetailing on your, on your team bonding comment there, I think that this is as horrible as this is for everybody. It does provide an outlet for you to build culture, weirdly enough. I think that the way you react to things in good and bad as a firm, as a group, builds your culture. That is what culture is. And one of the cool things that Riskalyze did this last week was ask people to remember a favorite time or a funny time in the office that they wanted to share with others. And so that memory of being together and what it's like to be with your colleagues and then sharing that and sharing those stories across the organization also, I think, helps build that team bonding and that culture.
The culture discussion is not one we've spent much time on today. We talked a lot about technology and management, but culture can transcend so much of this because if you have a culture of helpfulness, of positivity, of growth mindset, some of those things were mentioned, then people will work harder to overcome the challenges of the technology and the other little things. And pretending that it's business as usual is not going to be good for the culture. It's much better to facilitate these chances for people to open up, to engage, to vent, to become relatable. Some of the suggestions that were mentioned, like what Lori just shared. We for our team meeting last week, because we have one every week virtually, we didn't talk about business. We actually, we had everybody bring lunch. We watched 3 TED Talks and we did live chat about the TED Talks. Everybody loved it. They got enriched. We had a good time. There was funny things shared. Doing some of that type of thing, just keeping everybody learning and positive, it'll have a big impact on these other details because people will be motivated to want to work through them.
Yeah, I started actually just yesterday, just randomly calling employees, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever, Slack calls. I'd pick a name, call them, hey, how you doing? No, not work related at all. Just I want to say hi, make sure you and your family are doing well. Simple check-ins, stuff like that. Last time we talked, we were getting ready to do the trivia night that came out for the most part good. It was kind of funny, and that worked out really nicely. But yeah, just little empathy to everybody, right? Just start calling people randomly and saying hi. I want to call like Lori next, maybe. Just be like, hey, how you doing this afternoon?
It is like having the random hallway conversation. And I think that's great that you're doing that, Brian, because that's what I think people are missing out on most is the randomness of kind of the conversation or what you learn about each other personally and professionally probably as well.
Well, yeah, right. It's the hallway talk or the kitchen talk or whatever in the office that they're not getting anymore.
Right.
They're missing out on. So yeah, just little things like that just go a really long way to the company culture and surprises them, right? We did another thing. I do my weekly updates to the company. We're doing a company supported Takeout Tuesday next week. So one of the things that my family's always done is since it started is to try and support local non-chain family-owned businesses. So now we're going to have the company support that and subsidize that and tell them all to go out there and post on social media and say, hey, it's Takeout Tuesday. So little things like that go so far, because it shows that, we're all in this together.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love the comments that all 3 of them made. I mean, this is recently we told all of our employees that we'll pay you $500 towards an education program that you want to do online. And with the whole expectation that eventually when you finish your program, you're going to come back, you're going to teach a lunch session about whatever you learned. So we get something back and the
Very
community
cool.
gets exposure to a topic. Hopefully they wouldn't. I think there's a lot of people with, even though it does feel like, I feel like we're more productive than ever. I mean, there's no commute, there are no side conversations. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going back to back 15-minute intervals all day long. And there's no downtime to tend to focus on something completely different. I think we have to, as leaders, we have to find ways to enable other people to also not work 24 hours a day in our crew. Otherwise, they run the risk of burning out and not really being, they forget the why. Why am I doing this again? And so those are other, I think it's incumbent upon us to also lead from the front and make sure that we're going to put commitment behind it, capital or otherwise, to show that we're investing in people even now.
I think that I've heard from everyone on this panel that everyone has created within their companies a forum in a way for their teams to get together outside of work, right? Because for years I've experienced that being around Brian with your Redtail family there. Like, it's not all about the work. It's going to the ball game. It's doing those type of team building that are so important to build the culture. And we can't do that right now. So how do we replace that? And even though you can't replace going to a ball game right now, you can create the forum for your team to be able to feel comfortable getting on like a virtual happy hour, like Robert, you had done with your team really early on weeks ago. And I thought that was great. And now on social, I see virtual happy hours that everyone's being invited to constantly. And
He
so
started it.
Yeah, Robert, you started, definitely trendsetter. So that's fantastic. We've got time for maybe one or two more questions. I want to be conscious of everybody's time. We're almost at the bottom of the hour here. So when it comes to culture, just to kind of wrap this up, I know everyone here really has done such a great job with their teams. Is there any advice that you could give to the advisor network out there that hasn't had a remote work environment before and are being they're being forced now to come up with different ways of connecting? If anyone has one or two last thoughts, I think it'd be a great way to wrap this up.
Well, I can tell you that at least the financial planning firm of my affiliation is doing group text chats when anything goes on. We just had a baby a couple hours ago. I just saw that, and there was a tree that fell down on someone's car a couple hours ago. It was crazy weather outside. Not all good and bad, but the key is to keep a forum, and with it being very easy and it's constantly buzzing all day long. It feels very present and timely. So I think everybody said that finding a way to keep connected with your employees so that you can bust problems as they come up, because you're going to come onto all kinds of different challenges you didn't even plan for or think about. How do I get signatures? How do we scan this? They want to fax something. Like, so you just make sure there's an outlet to solve problems together, as opposed to marooning your employees in their home without the capability and technology. And then they're just frustrated and they don't want to call you with any problems. I know you're busy. So keep the channels open and say that you're available to solve problems, I think, is the key.
Great point. I know, Eric, you've been quiet for a lot of this. I'd love to hear some of your concluding comments. I know you've got some ideas.
Well, concluding comment wise, I think it's just really important that we all stay very optimistic. There's plenty of negative out there in the news and things that it seems like are constantly being escalated in the news that we receive about what's going on around us. But there are still a lot of great things happening. It's important that as leaders with our staff working from home, that we're a breath of fresh air with regard to being optimistic about things that we can control, things that we can be doing to make a difference, and even encouraging them to reach out in their community, in the communities where we live and work, and figure out how they can help. There are a lot of people out there that are hurting. The situation has been devastating to a lot of families. And in very basic ways, we could reach out to food banks, make a donation, you know, figure out ways that we can get involved in helping these kids at school. You know, make sure that while they're away from school, that they're still getting food, those types of things. You know, any way that we can get involved and help make a difference right now, I think will help us all feel a lot better about ourselves in this situation that we face. We're all in this together, but being optimistic about our future, I think will make all the difference.
Great.
Can't think of a better way to conclude this
Well
this
said.
roundtable than that. That was great, Eric. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone. We're at the bottom of the hour, so I think we'll wrap it up now. And thank you very much for the panelists for joining me again for this. This has been fantastic, and hopefully our advisors out there that are listening in had some good takeaways and some good wins today. So thanks everybody.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, everyone.
Stay well, everyone.